Yellowstone has a lot of earthquakes. There are about 700 to 3,000 earthquakes that happen every year in Yellowstone. However, most of them are not strong enough to be felt. They are caused by the many faults connected to the volcano and nearby tectonic features. Earthquakes in Yellowstone often happen in groups, happening close to each other in both time and location. But despite this, Yellowstone is an amazing place. In this video, we will be talking about the hundreds of earthquakes that have happened in this place, the causes, and so many other things you don't want to miss out on. So, let's delve right into it. Yellowstone National Park is a park in the western United States. It is mostly in Wyoming, but also extends into Montana and Idaho. The Yellowstone National Park Protection Act was created by the 42nd U.S. Congress and signed into law by President Ulysses S. Grant on March 1, 1872. Yellowstone is the first national park in the United States and is considered by many to be the first national park in the world. The park is famous for its animals and natural hot springs, especially the Old Faithful Geyser, which is very popular. The subalpine forest is the most common type of biome. It is located in the south-central Rockies forests ecoregion. Native Americans have been living in the Yellowstone region for a very long time, around 11,000 years. However, apart from some visits by mountain men in the 19th century, organized exploration didn't start until the late 1860s. The park was initially managed and controlled by the U.S. Department of the Interior. Columbus Delano was the first Secretary of the Interior to oversee the park. Eventually, the U.S. Army was given the responsibility of managing Yellowstone for 30 years, from 1886 to 1916. In 1917, the park's management was given to the National Park Service, which was established the year before. Many important buildings have been constructed and preserved for their architectural and historical value. Additionally, researchers have studied over 1,000 archaeological sites. The park is named after the Yellowstone River's headwaters. In the late 1700s, French trappers called the river Roche Jaune, which likely means Yellowstone River in the Hidatsa language. Later, American trappers translated the French name to English as Yellowstone. There is a widespread misconception that the river was given its name because of the yellow rocks that may be found in the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone. It is unclear, however, where the Native American name for the river came from in the first place. Over 11,000 years ago, people began making their homes in what is now the park. Native Americans utilized that area for hunting and fishing in the past. A Clovis obsidian point was discovered in the 1950s near Gardner, Montana, while construction was being done at the local post office. It is thought that this particular site is somewhere in the neighborhood of 11,000 years old. The abundant supply of obsidian in the park was mined by Paleo-Indians of the Clovis culture for the purpose of creating implements and weapons. Obsidian arrowheads manufactured in Yellowstone have been found in the Mississippi Valley, which lends credence to the theory that local tribes and tribes from further to the east engaged in a steady trade of obsidian. When the Lewis and Clark expedition finally made it to Montana in the year 1805, they came face to face with members of the Nez Perce, Crow, and Shoshone tribes. These indigenous peoples informed the expedition about the Yellowstone region located further to the south, but the group chose not to investigate it further. In 1806, John Coulter, who was part of the Lewis and Clark expedition, decided to leave and join a group of fur trappers. In 1807, Coulter separated from the other trappers. During the winter of 1807 to 1808, he traveled through a part of the area that would later become the park. He saw a geothermal area in the northeastern part of the park, close to Tower Fall. In 1809, Coulter got hurt in a fight with the Crow and Blackfoot tribes. He talked about a strange place called Coulter's Hell that had fire and brimstone. Many people thought he was just talking nonsense. In the next 40 years, many mountain men and trappers shared stories about boiling mud, steaming rivers, and petrified trees. However, most people thought these reports were just myths. The first expedition to the Yellowstone area was called the Cook-Folsom-Peterson Expedition of 1869. It was led by 3 explorers who were funded by private sources. The Folsom group went from the Yellowstone River to Yellowstone Lake. The Folsom party wrote a journal. Based on what they wrote, a group of people from Montana organized the Washburn-Langford Doane Expedition in 1870. The group was led by Henry Washburn, the Surveyor General of Montana. It also included Nathaniel P. Langford, who later became known as National Park Langford, and a U.S. Army detachment led by Lieutenant Gustavus Doane. The expedition lasted for around a month. During that time, they explored the area, gathered samples, and gave names to places they found interesting. Yellowstone National Park has a very big petrified forest. These are trees that were buried by ash and soil a long time ago and changed from wood to minerals. The ash and other volcanic debris are thought to have come from the park because Yellowstone's central area is a huge caldera of a supervolcano. The park has 290 waterfalls that are at least 15 feet tall. The tallest waterfall is the lower falls of the Yellowstone River, which is 308 feet high. It also has 3 deep canyons that were formed by rivers cutting through the volcanic tuff of the Yellowstone Plateau over the past 640,000 years. The Lewis River flows through Lewis Canyon in the south. The Yellowstone River has created 2 beautiful canyons, the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone and the Black Canyon of the Yellowstone, as it flows north. How the park came into existence. In 1871, Ferdinand Fife Hayden explored the region after his first attempt failed 11 years earlier. He went back to the region with a bigger expedition called the Hayden Geological Survey of 1871, which was sponsored by the government. He put together a detailed report that included big pictures by William Henry Jackson and paintings by Thomas Moran. The report convinced the U.S. Congress to stop the public auction of this region. President Ulysses S. Grant made Yellowstone National Park on March 1, 1872, by signing the Act of Dedication. Hayden was the first and most enthusiastic person to suggest creating a park in the region, although others had also considered the idea. He thought it was important to designate the area as a place for people to enjoy and have fun. He also warned that some people might try to exploit the beautiful things in the area for profit. He was concerned that the area might end up like Niagara Falls, so he believed that the site should be as free as the air or water. In his report to the Committee on Public Lands, he said that if the bill doesn't become law, people who want to harm the Wonderland will ruin it in just one season. These unique curiosities took thousands of years for nature to create, and they won't be able to be fixed if they are destroyed. Hayden and his party in 1871 acknowledged that Yellowstone was a special place that should be studied more. He was also told to keep it intact so that others could see and experience it too. In 1873, Congress approved and paid for a survey to find a path for wagons to reach the park from the south. The survey was carried out by the Jones Expedition of 1873. In the future, both railroads and automobiles will make that possible. The park wasn't only for nature conservation, but it wasn't meant to be turned into an amusement park either. Hayden imagined something similar to the beautiful resorts and spas in England, Germany, and Switzerland. Many people in the area did not support Yellowstone National Park when it first started. Some people in the area were worried that the local economy wouldn't do well if there were strict federal rules against using the park's resources or building in it. Local business owners wanted to make the park smaller so they could mine, hunt, and log there. Montana representatives introduced many bills in Congress to remove federal land use restrictions. Nathaniel Langford became the first superintendent of the park in 1872 after it was officially established. He was appointed by Columbus Delano, who was the Secretary of the Interior and in charge of overseeing the park. Langford worked for 5 years but did not receive a salary, funding, or staff. Langford did not have the resources to make the land better or keep the park safe. He also did not have any official rules or laws to help him enforce the protection of the park. As a result, Yellowstone became an easy target for poachers, vandals, and people looking to exploit its resources. In the 1872 report to the Secretary of the Interior, he talked about the real issues that park administrators had to deal with. He also predicted that Yellowstone would become a popular tourist spot and should be taken care of by the government. In 1874, Langford and Delano suggested making a federal agency to protect the big park, but Congress said no. In 1875, Colonel William Ludlow was given the task of leading an expedition to Montana and Yellowstone Park. He He had previously explored parts of Montana with George Armstrong Custer. In 1880, Harry Yount was chosen to be a gamekeeper to stop poaching and vandalism in the park. Yount had spent many years exploring the mountainous region of present-day Wyoming, including the Grand Tetons. He joined F.V. Hayden's Geological Survey in 1873. Yount was the first park ranger of a national park. Yount's Peak, located at the beginning of the Yellowstone River, was named after him. However, these measures were not enough to protect the park because Norris and the 3 superintendents who came after him did not have enough people or resources. The Northern Pacific Railroad constructed a train station in Livingston, Montana in 1883. This station served as a gateway to the northern entrance area and led to an increase in visitors from 300 in 1872 to 5,000 in 1883. The spur line was finished in the fall of that year. It connected Livingston to Cinnabar for stage connection to Mammoth. In 1902, it was extended to Gardner Station, where passengers also switched to a stagecoach. In the early years, visitors had to deal with bad and dusty roads and limited services. Cars were only allowed in certain phases starting from 1915. In 1901, a train connection was established from Chicago, Burlington, and Amp Quincy to Cody. Then, in 1908, a connection was made from the Union Pacific Railroad to West Yellowstone. In 1927, a connection was added from Milwaukee Road to Gallatin Gateway near Bozeman, which also provided transportation for visitors through West Yellowstone. The number of people using trains decreased a lot during World War II and eventually stopped completely in the 1960s because more people started using cars. However, there were still some special trips on trains until the early 1980s. Poaching and destruction of natural resources kept happening until the U.S. Army came to Mammoth Hot Springs in 1886 and built Camp Sheridan. During the subsequent 22 years, the United States Army constructed permanent buildings at Camp Sheridan and renamed the location Fort Yellowstone. The Park Protection Act was successfully approved on May 7, 1894, thanks to the efforts of a group known as the Boone and Crockett Club. This club was led by George G. Vest, Arnold Haig, William Hallett Phillips, W.A. Wadsworth, Archibald Rogers, and George Bird Grinnell. The Park Protection Act was ultimately responsible for the park's survival. The Lacey Act of 1900 provided legal assistance to authorities in their pursuit of poachers. The Army established regulations in order to maintain public access to the park while preserving the natural habitat and wild creatures there. They possessed sufficient resources, including both money and personnel, to carry out their plans. When the National Park Service was first founded in 1916, many management practices were taken from the Army. On October 31, 1918, the National Park Service took over management of the park after the Army handed over control. Volcanism in Yellowstone. Yellowstone is located in the northeastern part of the Snake River Plain. The plan is a curved arc that stretches about 400 miles from the park to the border of Idaho and Oregon. Scientists think that the volcanic activity in Yellowstone is connected to the volcanic activity in the Snake River Plain, which happened a little earlier. Yellowstone is an active area that is part of a hotspot. This hotspot has moved towards the northeast over time. There is disagreement about where this hotspot volcanism comes from. There are 2 theories about why the Yellowstone hotspot has moved northeast. One theory says it's because of a mantle plume, while the other theory says it's because of the movement and breakup of a plate inside the Earth. The Yellowstone caldera is the biggest volcano in North America. It is only matched in size by the Lake Toba caldera in Sumatra. It is called a supervolcano because the caldera was created by very big explosive eruptions. The magma chamber under Yellowstone is one big chamber that is about 60 kilometers long, 29 kilometers wide, and 4.8 to 11.3 kilometers deep. The big hole we see now was made by a huge explosion a long time ago. It happened 640,000 years ago, and a lot of ash, rock, and other materials came out. This eruption was over 1,000 times bigger than the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. It created a large hole in the ground that is almost 1 kilometer deep and covers an area of 45 by 28 miles. It also left behind a type of rock called lava creek tuff. 2.1 million years ago, there was a very violent eruption that threw out a lot of volcanic material. This created the Huckleberry Ridge Tuff and the Island Park caldera. About 1.3 million years ago, a smaller eruption happened, and it ejected around 280 cubic kilometers of material. This created the Henry's Fork caldera and left behind the Mesa Falls Tuff. The three big eruptions sent out a lot of ash that covered a large part of central North America, even falling hundreds of miles away. The ash and gases released into the air likely had a big effect on the weather worldwide and caused certain species to die out, especially in North America. Another big eruption happened around 160,000 years ago, which formed a caldera. It created a small caldera that holds the west thumb of Yellowstone Lake. After the last super eruption, there were many smaller eruptions that happened between 640,000 and 70,000 years ago. These eruptions filled up most of the Yellowstone caldera with 80 different types of lava, including rhyolitic lava found at Obsidian Cliffs and basaltic lava seen at Sheep Eater Cliff. You can see lava layers at the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. The Yellowstone River is still cutting through the old lava flows. The canyon has a traditional V shape, which shows that it was formed by a river's erosion and not by glaciers. Every eruption is part of a cycle where the volcano's roof partially collapses after the magma chamber inside it is partially emptied. This causes a sunken area called a caldera to form, and a large amount of volcanic material is released through cracks around the caldera. The time between the last three big eruptions in Yellowstone has been between 600,000 to 800,000 years. However, we can't use this small number of eruptions to accurately predict future volcanic events. Why are there so many earthquakes in Yellowstone? Most earthquakes at Yellowstone happen when rocks break because of pressure in the Earth's crust. Even though scientists have been studying Yellowstone for a long time, they still haven't been able to identify the long-period LP events that are often associated with magma movement. If we see LP events, it doesn't mean that Yellowstone is about to erupt. Earthquakes often happen at other volcanoes around the world, including ones in California that haven't erupted in hundreds or thousands of years. At Yellowstone's geothermal areas, there is a type of ground shaking called tremor that happens when water boils in a geyser. The biggest earthquake in the Rocky Mountains happened in 1959 at Hebgen Lake, which is northwest of Yellowstone. It had a magnitude of 7.3. It happened because the Earth's crust stretched or extended. The earthquake moved a fault that was 40 kilometers long and rose up to 12 meters in a vertical direction. Earthquakes can cause changes in Yellowstone's hydrothermal system, leading to shaking. The time between eruptions of Old Faithful Geyser got longer after the 1959 earthquake. Yellowstone is well known because it is located on a spot where hot molten rock comes up from deep inside the Earth. This causes the park to have geysers, mud pots, fumaroles, and hot springs. In May, there were 288 earthquakes that happened in Yellowstone National Park. These earthquakes occurred in 3 bursts called swarms. The ongoing eruptions of Steamboat Geyser in Norris Basin also show that the park is very prone to seismic activity. Researchers from the University of Leicester in Britain and the University of California, Santa Cruz have found that the supervolcano responsible for Yellowstone's geothermal activity has been decreasing in strength for a while now. Scientists recently published a study in geology where they revealed the discovery of 2 new supereruptions on Yellowstone's hotspot track. This includes the largest and most catastrophic event ever recorded from the supervolcano. The researchers found that there were 6 supervolcanic eruptions that happened between 23 and 5.3 million years ago. A supervolcano is a huge volcano that can cause widespread damage when it erupts. There is a big pocket of magma beneath the Yellowstone supervolcano. It erupted very violently over 630,000 years ago. The explosion caused a lot of damage in the area. It released ash and rocks and created a large hole where most of the national park is now located. These eruptions occurred about once every 500,000 years on average. In the last 3 million years, the Yellowstone hotspot has had only 2 super eruptions. Scientists keep an eye on the Yellowstone volcano to watch for any signs of volcanic activity. The Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, YVO, is a group made up of the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, Yellowstone National Park, the University of Utah, the University of Wyoming, UNavicio, the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology, the Idaho Geological Survey, and the Wyoming State Geological Survey. YVO keeps a close watch on volcanic activity at Yellowstone. They provide up-to-date information on earthquakes, ground changes, stream flow, and some stream temperatures. Furthermore, scientists from the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, YVO, work together with scientists from various countries to research the Yellowstone volcano. Yellowstone is located in an area of the western United States that has a lot of geological activity. In the past, there have been big earthquakes in that area, such as the 1959 M7.3 Hebgen Lake earthquake near Yellowstone National Park. It is likely that there will be more earthquakes in the future, but it is impossible to predict when they will happen. The University of Utah uses special machines called seismograph stations to keep track of earthquakes in the Yellowstone area. They also work with other partners from the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory to monitor the entire volcanic system. In September 2020, there were 510 earthquakes in one area of Yellowstone National Park. This is about twice as many as usual. The earthquakes happened near Grizzly Lake in the northwest part of the park. They were between Norris and Mammoth and started in July as part of an earthquake swarm, according to the United States Geological Survey, USGS. Since that time, there have been about 800 earthquakes in total. All the earthquakes in September were not very big. The biggest earthquake in the park was a 3.9 magnitude. A person might feel an earthquake of this size, but it usually only causes minor damage to buildings or objects. In 2017, there was a very big swarm of earthquakes in an area between Hebgen Lake and Norris Geyser Basin. It was the most active area for earthquakes in the park. Over 2,400 earthquakes were recorded between June and September, with the largest one being a magnitude 4.4. These swarms of earthquakes can happen at any time of the year, including winter. For example, in February 2018, there was a swarm of over 500 earthquakes in the area between Hebgen Lake and Norris Geyser Basin. This place has many existing faults. When groundwater comes into contact with these faults, it causes earthquakes. The area was also affected by the 1959 M7.3 Hebgen Lake earthquake, which makes it more likely to experience smaller earthquakes. Things you need to know before you decide to visit Yellowstone. 1. Yellowstone has 5 entrances that allow you to enter the park from different directions. Because the park is very big, with dimensions of approximately 63 miles by 54 miles, each entrance leads to a different location. They are appropriately named the West, North, Northeast, East, and South entrances. 2. Only a small portion of the park, about 2%, is visible from the road. The rest, 98%, is located away from the main paths. You shouldn't just look at Yellowstone's wonders from your car. One great way to explore Yellowstone is by hiking on the trails. Walking just half a mile on a boardwalk or trail will give you a better understanding of Yellowstone's features and landscape. Get ready to hike in Yellowstone. Leave your car behind and explore the amazing sights beyond your window. 3. The busiest months in Yellowstone are June, July, and August, just like many other popular travel destinations. According to Yellowstone's official website, over half of the park's annual visitors come during those 3 months. However, regular vehicles are not allowed on the roads in Yellowstone from mid-October to the 3rd week of April. If you want to avoid large crowds but don't want to visit during winter, May or September are good choices. Make sure to look at Yellowstone's detailed season overview to see what rangers say will happen each month in the park. Summer is a favorite season because you can go hiking and enjoy the nice weather, with temperatures ranging from 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, but getting cooler at night, between 30 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. While most people visit Yellowstone in the summer, visiting in the winter is also a magical experience, but in a different way. During the winter, the roads are closed to regular cars. Therefore, you need to reserve a snowmobile or snow coach tour. A snow coach is like a big van that has its tires taken off and replaced with large tank-like treads. Aside from the occurrence of earthquakes, Yellowstone is a really fun place and an incredible to have a nice time, so make sure to put it on your list of places to visit for your next vacation. Thanks for watching. Remember to give this video a like and subscribe to this channel for more. You really don't want to miss out on the adventures we have for you.